the only woman scheduled to be executed in 2022, Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. Her execution date is April 27, 2022. This day might change because of a stay of execution, or any other circumstance that might warrant to stop her execution. Melissa was born on July 18, 1968. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio was convicted of killing her daughter, Mariah, in 2007. On February 17, 2007, Harlingen Police found Mariah Alvarez unresponsive at the family's apartment off of Lee Street. Alvarez was later transported to the emergency room at Valley Baptist Medical Center in Harlingen, where she was pronounced dead by medical personnel. Melissa told authorities the child had fallen down some stairs, but emergency room physicians found she had bruises covering her body, bite marks on her back, an arm that had been broken weeks earlier and was missing hair that had been pulled by the roots from her head. An autopsy showed the girl had been bitten on her head and the injuries were not caused by a fall down some stairs. Lucio was arrested on February 18, 2007, by the Harlingen Police Department, indicted on May 16, 2007 and arraigned on May 31, 2007. Lucio of Harlingen was found guilty of capital murder for the death of her 2.5-year-old daughter, Mariah Alvarez. A jury of 12 good and true citizens of Cameron County has decided the fate of a convicted capital murderer, District Attorney Armando Villalobos and Assistant District Attorneys Alfredo Padilla, Maria DeFord and Joseph Cripple secured a conviction on July 8, 2008, after a week-long jury trial. Lucio is the first female in Cameron County history to be sentenced to death by lethal injection. She was confined at Carrizales Record Detention Center in Olmito until she was transferred in 2 to 4 weeks to the Mountain View Unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, Institutional Division in Gatesville. The last time the District Attorney's Office pursued the death penalty was the John Allen Rubio and Angela Camacho case in 2003. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio burst into tears as a jury in 138th State District Court found her guilty of the beating death of her 2-year-old daughter. Lucio continued to sob as all 12 jurors were polled and individually told Judge Arturo Cisneros Nelson that they had voted to find the Harlingen mother guilty of capital murder for killing Mariah Alvarez. On February 17, 2007, Cameron County District Attorney Armando Villalobos said he will seek the death penalty when the punishment phase of the trial begins. It was always the plan of his office to seek the death penalty against the mother of 14 for battering her little girl to death. During his final argument, lead defense attorney Peter Gilman said it is not true that his client had confessed to a Texas Ranger that she had bitten her daughter to death. They think they got a confession. Nowhere in that statement does it say, "I killed my child." 3 doctors testified that she could have died from blunt force head trauma by falling down the stairs. His client was grilled by police from about 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. after likely rising at 6 a.m. the day before to take care of a house full of children. She was not accompanied by a lawyer, he said. "My client is not up for Mother of the Year. She's guilty of child abuse, but they haven't proved she intentionally murdered her child." His client told police she was told Mariah had fallen down a flight of stairs about 24 hours before her death, and described the exact symptoms she would have suffered from hitting her head in a fall. Lucio said she wasn't present when her daughter fell because the family was moving from an apartment on Madison Avenue in Harlingen to another apartment on Lee Street, Gilman said. His client agreed to take a polygraph examination and police took samples of her hair, fingernail clippings, and a DNA mouth swab, but none of those samples were tested. Lead prosecutor Alfredo Padilla urged the jury to ignore claims that Mariah's death was caused by a fall down some stairs. He asked the jury to review photos that showed her battered and bruised body and to remember testimony by experienced doctors who called it the worst case of child abuse they had ever seen. Assistant Dia Maria D. Ford asked jurors to use their common sense and review the long list of bruises, lacerations, and even a broken arm that Mariah suffered during the 88 days that she lived with her mother after living for 2 years in foster care. After the court session ended, Sonia Chavez, Lucio's younger sister, told a reporter that she found it was curious that the courtroom was filled with Child Protective Service workers during the entire trial. When we were conducting the funeral, there were lots of CPS people there. Why were they all here and at the funeral when there are so many children who need protection and families that need help? Chavez also said that a Harlingen Police detective was lying when he testified that he had heard Lucio say during a cellular phone call that it was she, not her husband, who killed Mariah. She was making that call to me. Lucio never said those things he said she did. Lucio's husband, Robert Antonio Alvarez, stand trial separately for injury to a child by omission, prosecutors said. A Harlingen detective testified that he overheard Melissa Elizabeth Lucio admit that she was responsible for the beating death of her 2.5-year-old daughter. Lucio is charged with capital murder in the February 17, 2007, death of Mariah Alvarez. Officer Robert Muse testified that he and another officer were driving Lucio and her husband to a Brownsville dentist, and that Lucio was allowed to make a call on a cell phone at that time. He said he heard Lucio say, "Don't blame Robert. This was me. I did it." Lucio and her husband Roberto Antonio Alvarez were to have casts made of their teeth, to compare to bite marks found on Mariah's back. Numerous photos of the child's body, covered with new and old bruises and other injuries, were presented to the jury. Prosecutors attacked Lucio's statement to police that the little girl fell down a flight of outside stairs at the family's former apartment on Madison Avenue. Lawyers on both sides of the case said Lucio has had 14 children, the oldest of which are now adults, and the youngest were Mariah and a set of twins born in jail after she was arrested on the capital murder charge. Defense attorney Peter Gilman hammered detectives and a Child Protective Service worker during their turns on the witness stand. Melissa Lucio was sentenced to death on August 12, 2008. Melissa Lucio, a Texan woman who was the first woman of Hispanic descent in Texas to be sentenced to death. Lucio has been on death row for 15 years. If executed on April 27, 2022, Melissa will be 53 years old at the time of her execution. Thank you for watching.